What's up guys, it's Mega giving you another deck for Link Evolution. Today guys, we're doing a deck that is on the list, and that is a Super Quantum deck. This is one of my favourite decks from the old Legacy, so I'm really glad they got a little bit new support in the update, and it's just made the deck a very fun deck to play. I don't think I've ever played a deck that has made 3 people rage quit second they see either a certain card or they just see a spam of monster effects. Like the first 3 duels you're going to see in the replays, every single one leaves. It's actually very funny. And the whole deck is about exyz summoning from using their field spell, which is absolutely very powerful. It's kind of, think of this deck as like the Power Rangers of the Yu-Gi-Oh type or Yu-Gi-Oh world. For you have monsters that morph into or go into exyz summon, and then they have the big boss man when they all merge together. Very fun. It's very Power Rangers. If you're struggling to make this deck or any deck shown so far, guys, I highly recommend you check out the card hub in the description down below. Not only does it tell you if a card is in this game or not, it will tell you where to find it, like a campaign, challenge mode, campaign. It will tell you everything you need to know. And with that, guys, let's get into the video. Starting us off, guys, is 2 copies of Ash Blossom and Joy Springs. Hand trap. If your opponent does anything from their hand or from the deck, such as add a card from the deck to the hand, special summon from the deck, or send a card from the deck to the grave, Ash Blossom just shuts it down, gives the deck a little bit more of a protection. We're using 2 of the Performer Mages. We're using 1 Damage Juggler and 1 Trick Clown. The reason why is because it's kind of better than the Volcanics, and the Volcanics kind of like clean up your deck a little bit more. This is kind of like a better way because it kind of serves 2 purposes, and they are actually multiple purposes. So for instance, Damage Juggler, it has a quick effect that activates in the hand where you can discard it if you would take effect damage, and you negate that effect damage, which is pretty nice, and it destroys the card that inflicted it. So for instance, if you're against decks like Trick Stars that like to deal effect damage, you can't destroy them while negating the damage. It has a graveyard effect, which is very good, where you can remove it from your graveyard from play in order to add a Performer Mage from your hand, and that's going to come in very clutch when we get to the field spell. And the card obviously you'll be searching is Trick Clown, and when Trick Clown is sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 Performer Mage monster, including itself, in your graveyard, and special summon it. Yes, you do take 1,000 life points and its stats do become 0, but because it just makes it, the Magna Carrier, which is our field spell, is so good because you have to discard a card, so you can discard Trick Clown to do an exyz summon. Then you take Trick Clown resurrects. You can overlay it with Green Layer, which is the level 4 monster, and you're able to do another exyz for free without having to diminish your hand. It's the reason why we're running the Performer Mages. Onto the Super Quantum cards themselves, guys. I'm basically running 3 of all of them because all of them have kind of a field effect and a graveyard effect. So they are very powerful, they are very recyclable. The only one who is kind of like the what's the word trying, like the exempt from that rule is Fairy Alphon. So Fairy Alphon has 2 effects. The main effect where you can target 1 Super Quantum monster you control, all monsters become that card's level. You really use that effect. You really will use that effect. The main reason why you're going to use Fairy Alphon is for its second effect, where you can tribute it and select 3 Super Quantum monsters with different names from your deck. So green, blue, red or white layer, and your opponent has to choose one. And that monster they chose gets summoned. The other 2 go to the grave, which then will trigger the monster you chose's field effect, and it will trigger the other 2 monsters' graveyard effects. Really overpowered. It's the only bit of RMG that is in the deck, because for instance, if you're banking on, alright, I really need that blue layer to search out a card, and it doesn't, it kind of be a little bit RMG, but you have to live with it. Speaking of which, 3 copies of Blue Layer. This card, or should I say Blue Ranger, when this card is normal or special summoned, all of them have the effects with the normal or special summoned, and then they all have a graveyard effect. So when this card is normal or special summoned, you get to add any Super Quantum card from your deck to your hand. That does include spells, traps, the lot. We're only running the spell cards, we ain't running the trap cards, so that's the only reason why we are why you would only particularly choose the monster, or you would choose the field spell. And when this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target up to 3 Super Quantum cards in your grave, shuffle them into the deck. Gives the deck that recyclable, so really you never deck out. It's really hard to deck out with this deck. So with Blue Layer, the main thing you would want to realistically send back is like Alphon, so then you can keep using its effects, or the other layers, and including itself, so then you can keep using Alphon's ability. And we're using 3 copies of Green Layer. He's kind of like the worst of them all, but you need to use him because he can be very helpful in a lot of times. So the main reason why you would actually run him is because when he is null or special summoned, you get to special summon a Super Quantum monster from your hand, which is really good because Red Layer can special summon itself. If you then normal summon Green Layer, you can special summon Blue Layer from your hand, such if all 3 of them in your hand. You search out the field spell, boom, instant free access to 3 exyz summons should you have the cards. Really great, and he has in a graveyard where you can discard a Super Quantum card, which will then, if it's a monster, trigger its graveyard effect and draw an extra card. Can come in handy, especially depending on which graveyard effect you'll be triggering. And as for Red Layer, one of the best ones, it kind of has like an added effect based on top of the others. So if you have no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand, like a Cyber Dragon, and then it has its normal or special summon effect, where you can target a Super Quantum in the grave, add it to your hand. Always going to be useful, especially if you special summon, because then you can target the card you added to your hand and just summon it for its normal summon effect. And when it's sent to the graveyard, you can special summon a Super Quantum from your grave, which is really powerful because it gets that other monster back and you can do a lot of plays. The only downside is, if you special summon a monster from the graveyard with this card, it can't activate its effect. So don't think, oh, I could send Blue Layer to the graveyard, then resurrect it with Red Layer, then trigger Blue Layer's effect. Fortunately, it doesn't work like that, otherwise this card would be really OP, but it's still very good nevertheless. And then 3 copies of Super Quantum White Layer. This is the new bad boy, and he just makes the deck so much better. So it kind of like with the Red Layer, it kind of has a better effect, so it's a higher level. You can send 1 non-light. So the downside, you can't send Fairy Alphon to the grave with this card, but you can send the other 3 to the graveyard or in your hand or face the field to the grave, and special summon this card in defense mode, which is really great because again it will trigger your graveyard effects. And it has a normal effect, or it has a summon effect where you can send a Super Quantum monster from your deck to the grave, including itself as well. This monster's level and attribute changes to the monster you discarded. So if you send Blue Layer, it becomes a water attribute and will have a level of 3. And it has a graveyard effect where if it goes to the grave, you can add Fairy Alphon from your deck or graveyard to your hand, which is a really powerful effect because it just allows you to search, especially if you send it to the graveyard during your opponent's turn, you can just search Fairy Alphon and then you're set to go for your next turn. And because you're sending, and because of its normal summon, you get to send a monster to the graveyard, you will trigger that monster's effect again, and it's just explosive. And that's it for the monsters, guys. Going to some spells. We're running 3 copies of Caught by the Grave. Last thing you want to do is to get hand trapped, especially during your combos when you want to do a lot of them. And so you play Caught by the Grave, it negates it. So should your opponent activate a monster effect, or have a monster effect, or any effect monster, or any monster I should say, you can target 1 monster in the grave, remove it from play. And if it's effect monster, it negates that effect. So majority of hand traps, except from Nibiru, go to the graveyard upon using their effects, like Ash Blossom. You play Caught by the Grave, you negate the hand trap. And should your opponent try to resurrect cards with like Monster Reborn, or Caught by the Grave, or like an in-deck or an in-archetype Monster Reborn, you can remove it from play instead because it's a quick play, and then you can stop them from basically resurrecting their card. We've got 1 copy of Emergency Teleport. It is limited to 1, and the reason why, because Super Quantum Blue Layer is classed as a psychic monster. So you can play Teleport, summon out Blue Layer for free from your hand or deck, and then you can then use its effect to search a Super Quantum card or monster, and then you can go off from there. Using Foolish Burial because all of our monsters except Fairy Alphon have a graveyard effect, including the Perform Mages have graveyard effects, so you will always benefit from using Foolish Burial. We've got 1 copy of Instant Fusion. Now the reason we're running Instant Fusion is because we're running that lone copy of Millennium Mize Restrict. Millennium Mize Restrict is kind of like a monster version of Caught by the Grave because it can negate 1 effect monster from activating its effect, including from the hand. So if your opponent just tried to Nibiru you or anything, if you don't have the Caught by the Grave, you can kind of like prevent your opponent from hand trapping you so you can do your plays. And 1 copy of Monster Reborn because you always need that resurrection, so you can go off and do more combos for like links, and also helps for exyz. 1 copy of 1 for 1 because we can send a monster from the deck to the graveyard, or from the hand to the graveyard, and will trigger the most popular graveyard effects, known if all of them have 1, and then you can special summon a level 1 monster, being Fairy Alphon from the deck, and then you can play Fairy Alphon's effect. And then we've got 2 copies of Pot of Desires. Now you might think, whoa, 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 why are you running Desires? Surely Pot of Avarice would be better. Yes, it kind of would do, but the downside is Desires you can activate whenever you want, especially when you need those 2 cards. Avarice will only activate should you have 5 monsters in the graveyard. So it's like, you might need to, like, we're running near enough 3 of every single card we're running. So you literally, like, even if you banish a white layer and a blue layer, you're still not going to miss it too much. So those key cards could be very helpful. 1 copy of Reasonings limited to 1. Your opponent chooses a level between 1 and 12. You keep milling cards. You keep showing cards on the top of your deck. If it's a spell or trap, it goes to the graveyard. If it's a monster with a level that's different from the level your opponent chose, so if they chose 5 and you drew 3, you can special summon that monster. If it's the level your opponent chose, it goes to the graveyard. But either way, if it's a graveyard effect, boom, who gives a crap? It can activate as a graveyard effect. If it's summoned, boom, get a free monster, and it can special summon itself, and it can gains that effect. And then we've got 2 copies of Super Quantum Alpha Call Appeal, which is a very good card. So the only downside is about this card, it only triggers if your opponent destroys a monster by battle, but it also so even if destroyed by card effects, this card can't trigger. Please bear that in mind. But it's such a good card. So if a Super Quantum monster you control is destroyed by battle, so you could even purposely crash one of your monsters into your opponent. And if you do, you can special summon a Super Quantum Mech Beast exyz from your extra deck. Boom, cheese it out. Really great with our field spell, because we'll come to that in a minute. And then you can special summon a Super Quantum Layer monster that's the same attribute as that monster. So for instance, if you choose Magnus, which is the fire one, you can special summon a red layer. But the downside is the monster you special summon through this card's effect has its effect negated. Please bear that in mind. And then we've got 3 copies of the field spell Super Quantum Mech Ship Magna Carrier. Such a good card. Searchable with terraforming, and it is an absolute beast. This card brings out our boss card, which is the king himself, the supreme deity, King Magnus. So with this card, you can discard 1 Super Quantum, or discard 1 card, target a Super Quantum monster you control, and then summon a Super Quantum Mech Beast with the same attribute as it. So if you have white layer, can summon out a white summon out the white monster, the light attribute one. If white layer changes effect, uses the first change attribute, you go into which one it chose. So if you have a fire, you go into Magnus. If you have a wind, you go into Ouroboros. You see what I mean? Also, and this effect is not a once per turn. That's why it's kind of broken. It also has a second effect, where you can send this card to the grave and 3 Super Quantum Mech Beasts with different names from your field or graveyard, attach it to the Great King Magnus and special summon him. So this card gets out Magnus, cheeses him out, and it's just OP. Terraforming, like I say, you use that to search out Magna Carrier. Upstart Goblin, yes, it gives your opponent 1,000 life points, but you draw that other card, because again, just drawing that key card can be everything, especially during your combo. And then 3 copies of Infinite Impertinence. All I want to do is to stop your opponent from activating monster effects. If you have no cards, so if you're going second, you can activate Infinite Impertinence from your hand, which is really great, especially against a lot of combo decks. And if you set this card and activated it, if your opponent activates a spell or trap in the same column as this trap, you negate that as well. So please bear that in mind. Going on to the monsters, guys. I've already kind of touched over Millennium Eyes Restrict, but I'll quickly go over it again. So it has a quick effect where you can target 1 effect monster your opponent controls or in their graveyard, equip it to this card, and if you do it gains that monster attack, but you don't particularly care about that. So for instance, if you have this card and you activate Upstart, so you want to draw a card, your opponent tries Ash Blossom you can just play Millennium Eyes Restrict, negate that take control of that monster, and basically you negate that monster's effect. And that's particularly the reason why you particularly use Millennium Eyes Restrict. We are using 1 copy of number 60, Duelist the Timeless. That's a bit of a mouthful, I think I said that wrong. The reason why I'm using this, 2 level 4, so for instance the 2 Performer Mages, or Green Layer, or White Layer if you did send Green Layer to the graveyard, but because Trick Clown can resurrect itself, it's really easy to go into. So this card has 3 special abilities which all come in handy. So you can skip your next draw phase, draw 2 cards and discard 1. those 2 cards could be key, particularly because you have to discard, so you trigger one of your Super Quantum's graveyard effect. You can skip your next main phase 1, special summon a monster from your grave, which is always good because then you can, again, if you've got Magna Carrier, you can go for another overlay, and it just goes off from there. Or you can skip your next battle phase and double the attack of 1 monster you control, which is all in all very decent. Onto some Super Quantum cards. We've got 2 copies of each, which is 2 Ouroboros. So this is the air one that you, the wind one that you would use with green layer normally. So with this bad boy, all of them have effects that are quick effects that will activate if you have their corresponding like layer monster as attached to them. So for Ouroboros it's green, Grand Pulse it's blue, the new one I can't pronounce is the white layer, and the Magnus is the red layer. So this card's effect is you can target 1 face-up monster on the field, change it to face-down position. And cards that are in face-down position can't be used as overlay, and they can't be used as link material. So that's absolutely great. And great. So this card becomes a quick effect if you have green layer attached to it. And they all have another effect. All of the monsters have this effect where you can attach 1 Super Quantum monster from your hand or field, so this card has an overlay unit. The main reason is because all of them also share this effect. They cannot attack unless it has an exyz material. Please bear that in mind. So if you do use your monster's effect, please bear in mind if they don't have any overlay units, they ain't attacking. And Grand Pulse, what this bad boy does, you can use 1 overlay unit, destroy 1 spell and trap on the field. Again, if you have blue layer, it can use this effect during your opponent's turn, which is key, especially if they need that specific spell or trap. Then we have got, I think it's Lustrelix. This is the new one, which is very good, that you use with white layer, and its effect is basically an infinite impertinence, where you can detach 1 overlay unit, target 1 effect monster in the field, that face-up monster's effect are negated into the end phase, and if you have a white layer, it comes a quick effect. I want to please bear this in mind, guys, because they are quick effects, you're doing it during your opponent's turn. Should your monsters go to the graveyard, you're going to trigger their layers effects as well, so all stuff is going to happen, not just these monsters' effects. And then finally we have a Magnus. So when Magnus, you can use 1 overlay unit, target 1 monster in the field, destroy it. If it's a quick effect, should you have red layer attached to it as an overlay. So you see what? So Magnus can destroy monsters. Lustrelix can negate monster effects. Grand Pulse can destroy spells and traps. And then Ouroboros can basically flip them face down if they wanted to attack or if they wanted to link summon. They are very overpowered, and all of them have very high attack and defense, have attack or defense points, so they all have sweet effects, but then they can all Power Rangers morph into the big boss man himself, the terrifying, the divine Super Quantum Mech King Great Magnus. This bad boy has caused a lot of people to rage quit, and you will see in the replay one of them does. So this bad boy is a boss, and I do mean the word a boss. So this card is if this card is sent to the graveyard, so it has a floating effect, you can special summon 3 Super Quantum Mech Beasts exyz from your grave. So please bear in mind, you need Magna Carrier, which needs 3 exyz monsters to bring out this card. When this card goes to the grave, those monsters come back, which is very overpowered. Then it also has effects based on how many overlay units it has. And please bear in mind, these effects stack, which is very frightening. So if it has 2 or more overlay units, it has a quick effect where you can target 1 monster on or 1 card on the field, shuffle it into the deck. So it's like a Compulse or a Nightmare Unicorn quick effect on steroids, very powerful. If it has 4 or more overlay units, it can't be targeted by card effects, which with a 3600 attack point beat stick that can't be targeted by card effects and has a unicorn effect whenever it wants is very overpowered. And then if it has 6 more overlay units, your opponent cannot add any cards from their deck to their hand by card effects. So if they try to Desires, Pot of Extravagance, Upstart, they played like the monsters that lie you, like Rhoda, anything like that, nope, can't do any of that because Magnus shuts them down. It is a boss, absolute beast this card is. On to some links, guys. We are running a copy of Infinite Fortress Megaclops. Now, this guy is another beast in himself. We have two beasts in this deck. So for this guy, he is unaffected by other monster effects except for those of exyz monsters, and also he can't be destroyed in battle except by an exyz monster. So if your opponent ain't running exyz monsters, nothing they do can even affect a Megaclops. So what this bad boy does, he has a couple of effects. You can target one exyz monster in your grave, and one card your opponent controls, doesn't care if it's a monster or a spell or trap. Special summon the exyz in your grave and attach the card that your opponent has on their field to it. So it's basically a monster reborn for all of your exyzes. And the best part is, the only downside is, if you use this effect, your opponent takes half damage for the rest of the turn, which is kind of bad, but the best bit is, if you have Magna Carrier and if you have your 3 exyz monsters ready to go, you have a choice. You can either go into the Great King Magnus and have its effect where it can't be destroyed in battle, or so destroyed by card effects, or unaffected by card effects. Your opponent cannot add cards and all that lot. Or you can go into Megaclops, then use Magna Carrier's effect to use your monsters in the graveyard, and then bring out Magnus. So you would have Magnus and Megaclops on the field at the same time. That's kind of frightening, especially since Magnus can bounce a card back. Then you can use Megaclops to basically resurrect the monster that you sent to the grave through Magnus's effect. So from these 2 cards, you can clear 2 cards of your opponent's field every turn, which is really overpowered. We are running 1 copy of Link Karibo because we are running some level 1s such as Fairy Alphon, because if you play Fairy Alphon and oops, you don't have the correct monsters in the grave or the monsters in your deck to use its effect, you can at least bounce yourself back and summon out a Link Karibo. Or if you play Instant Fusion and summon out Millennium Analyzer Strict, you can use it to go into Link Karibo. And then we have the Neo Super Quantum Mech King Blaster Magna, which is kind of like a weaker version of the Great King Magnus, but very good nevertheless. So you need 2 effect monsters, and one of them have to be a Super Quantum monster. So if you use, so that's very easy to do. This Link Summon card cannot be destroyed by card effects, so that gives it a really good little bit of protection. And each time, a Super Quantum exyz monster with a different name from the cards you control is special summoned from the extra deck. So basically, if you use Magna Carrier's effect to exyz summon a monster basically next to one of this card's links, you get to draw an extra card. So the card that you discarded through Magna Carrier, you replace by drawing it. And if a face-up exyz monster this card points to is destroyed in battle or by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon a Super Quantum monster from your deck with the same attribute as the destroyed exyz. So, for instance, if Magnalore, which is the fire one, gets destroyed, you can just summon Red Layer. So it's kind of like very good. But this card you can activate at the same time as the Alpha Core. So Alpha Core can special summon an exyz monster next to its link, and then special summon a monster. Super Quantum Mech King special summon another monster. Then because you've summoned an exyz monster through your magic card next to this card's link, you draw another card. So it's like, yeah, you may have just destroyed my monster, but I've just replaced it with 3 other cards. Very overpowered. And that's it for the deck, guys. I do hope you enjoyed it. Super Quantums are so fun. I really enjoyed making this deck. It's like a blast from the past. I enjoyed them in the old Legacy, and I love them even more in this one. And I have got a few replays coming up, and you can just see people's frustration because 3 out of 4 of the replays leave, which is kind of annoying because I really want to show you how this deck performs when people don't leave, but dims the brakes. I am making some more decks on the quest. If you have any more, guys, let me know. And with that, guys, wherever you are in the world, stay safe. If you enjoyed this deck, hit that thumbs up, and I shall see you when I see you guys. So stay safe, stay healthy, and take care. Goodbye.
on this.